Hi there, good evening and welcome to Gersnet for your Sunday night podcast, the night where we look ahead, or look behind rather, to a pretty dismal afternoon at Hampden again for Rangers today. This is Gersnet and then we will keep you for another hour or so. Happy to be joined tonight by Brian Archer. Hi Brian, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Yes, not bad. All things considered, it's hard to even sound positive a little bit, to be honest with you. I mean, I have to be honest. Stuart Weir may have a better idea or a better way of making us sound positive. Hi, Stuart. How's it going?
Hi, Scott. Hi, Brian. How are we? Fantastic evening. Looking forward to the next hour or so.
Yes, listen, it's a good thing we can laugh. A really, really dismal day, I think. And if there was ever a way to end the season early, it's probably Brian losing a semi-final at Hampden to Celtic, isn't it? It was just a poor afternoon for us today.
It was, yeah. I think, to be honest, it was probably what we all feared. I never felt we'd get beaten badly today. I just always felt that in both boxes we would lack the cutting edge that they would show, and I think that's what proved, to be honest. I felt for large parts of that game we competed. They never cut us open on many occasions, to be honest. We were the masters of our own downfall yet again, as we've been so often this season. We don't take our chances when they present themselves. Again, another major issue that needs resolving, but it was just kind of like, we've seen this movie before. And yeah, if we could end the season right now, I would happily take it because the summer's badly needed.
Stuart, one of the sort of big talking points on the run-up to the game this afternoon probably was the recent sort of missing Connor Goldson and Ryan Kent, and whether either of those would be drafted straight back in as starters. There was a wee bit of debate over whether if Goldson was fit to start, Ben Davies would perhaps miss out and Suter would play, thus taking away this balance that people kind of get arty-farty around having a right-sided centre-half and a left-sided centre-half. Turns out he did go with Davies, who I thought played okay today. Did you think Goldson and Kent should have wandered back in? Considering Kent's sort of input to the day, I think probably not, to be honest.
I think in the first half, in fact, I think throughout the match, you saw one or two interventions of Goldson, especially, and you thought to yourself, there's somebody who is actually switched on for the game, especially in the first half.
Yeah.
Kent, I would have to say, as I felt for a number of weeks, maybe even months, and I've been a big defender of Ryan Kent, given what he can possibly offer. I just thought he was a complete non-entity today.
Yeah.
I well remember, I mean, I've been a lot about Graham Souness today on Sky and retiring from Sky. There was an Old Firm game. Rangers were still trailing Celtic in the title race, and it was the New Year game. And Rangers won it 2-0. It was Souness' first New Year game. And he basically strutted around the midfield, dominated the midfield. But on several occasions, he basically put the ball out to Davy Cooper with the words, accompanied by the words, "Here, you're the fucking winger, do something." You know, I'm not making that up. I have that good authority from actually a couple of Celtic players that played in that game. And it was Souness basically saying, I haven't picked you in this team just to make up the numbers. I want to see something from you. And if you're as much of a hero or even a legend amongst the Rangers fans as you think you are, here, shows what you're about. And Cooper had a great game. I think Kent at times is left to his own devices. It's it's almost like he takes passes and gets the balls, and he'll go here and he'll go there. He's a lot into himself, and I don't think there's anybody in that team. And honestly, maybe it's because he's detached, say, from the captain, who is, diametrically opposite where he plays in the pitch. Yeah. There's nobody telling this guy, come on, we need a bit more from you. This is what you need to be doing. This is where you need to be. Or even just go at him, cajoling him into actually doing something. Yeah. And he struts around, as we saw today, everybody thinking that he'll come good. But for weeks, there's been no hint or evidence that this guy is going to come good ever again for Rangers. And I don't just mean in an Old Firm semi-final. I mean in his time at Rangers. It almost looks as if he's given up and doesn't really want anything else to do with it other than protect himself from any of these scary tackles that might come his way. And I thought it was a pretty deplorable performance from him. Not just him, there were several others in that team who really, if they don't take a good look at themselves, then somebody else managerially should be taking a look at them. But it was very, very poor, given the stage and the platform that he should have been crying out to play on.
Yeah, listen, I don't think there's any doubt that we've today we've seen a sort of Rangers game that I think has been sort of the beginning of the end for many of the players, and I think that's been, Brian, I don't know what you think, but I think that's been a sort of running theme for a few weeks now, to be perfectly honest with you. I think you see a few of them that are just not necessarily running out of steam, and I loathe to say down tools because I think that's really unfair, and I'm sure they're not doing that, but there certainly seems to be one or two who don't seem to be pulling their weight in the manner that you would expect them to in a blue jersey.
Yeah, I think there's possibly 3 or 4 in that team that know that their futures lie elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few of them that probably know that's required. Ryan Kent, for me, looks like a man that knows that he needs a fresh challenge. He knows that his time is up, and he's just kind of counting down the days until the summer. It feels like that anyway. And certainly Morelos as well, for me, he's got that similar look about him, that he knows that he's not going to be here beyond the summer. He knows there's another challenge waiting him, and he's just kind of biding his time now until that contract ticks down. Yeah, I think we know that that's been the case, that there's going to be a major overhaul in the summer. Bill's talked about it often enough about how big this overhaul is going to be. My only worry with this is that we're going to may have a problem getting some of these players out the door that are still under contract. There's numerous players there that, a couple of years ago we could have got some real money for, and now we're going to struggle. And players that aren't even getting in the team, how do you demand a significant fee for guys like Glenn Kamara when he's not getting in the team? Whereas 2 years ago they were talking about upwards of £10 million for him. For me, there's real lessons to be learned over the last kind of 2 or 3 transfer windows of when is the right time to sell your key assets when their value is at the highest, and we've missed that window of opportunity with 3 or 4 of them. So I think it's badly needed to clear out in the summer. Bill said today that you're potentially looking at double figures in terms of incomings and outgoings. That's badly needed, but then there's also the kind of caveat of that kind of squad overhaul takes time to gel. We cannot afford a slow start next season. We need to be hitting the ground running in pre-season and going full steam ahead when the season kicks off in July or August.
Yeah, it's very depressing to think you're thinking about the start of next season already, isn't it? 5 games still to go in the season, and you know that everything's effectively bust. Sure, were you going to say something there? Sorry?
I was going to pick up on something that Brian had said there, and he made a relevant point, whether he agrees with me or not. But what he said was about Kent looks like a guy who needs a new challenge. If Kent perceives that he needs a new challenge, then he's the one that's doing that thinking for himself. I think he would happily be accepted by Rangers and Rangers fans if he'd been doing a job that that we've seen in the past, that everybody knows he's capable of. I just think, the phrase "down tools," I don't think it. Well, I might use that myself now and again, but I think everybody gives of their best. But I think he's quite happy for his best to be 75% or 80%. I don't think he's given his all, simply because I think he believes that he's maybe no longer wanted at Rangers. And again, the point that Brian made, absolutely justified. And what in the work environment, you might be comfortable in your job, but I learned many years ago from other people who knew a lot more than I did at the time. If somebody makes you an offer you can't understand, take it. Because it might never come again.
Yeah.
And I go back to these, whether they were spurious figures or from the pen of Hans Christian Andersen, I'm not sure that somebody was going to pay Rangers 13 million quid for Morelos, or that Ryan Kent was going to be worth 10 million quid or 12 million quid from an English Premier League side, be it Leeds or Southampton or whoever it might be. If that was the case, take it, bite their hands off, spend £1 million quid in wrapping paper and sellotape and postage to make sure he gets there, and let him go. Because these guys are never going to reach those kind of figures again, or that kind of value. And if you're managerially challenged, or your scouting system is so challenged that you cannot find replacements for these people by the time the next transfer window comes round, you shouldn't be doing that job either.
Yeah.
I just think, I think, let's be fair here. Morelos, as we've touched upon him, cost next to nothing given the return that he's had. But I always think his goals, I had a slight debate with somebody on Twitter, but he scored more goals in Europe than anybody else. That's because he's played more games in Europe than anybody else. If you take Derek Johnson, for instance, who up until Ali McCoy's, he was Rangers' best goal scorer, there were some seasons where, at least one season, he didn't play in Europe because Rangers were banned. Another season, Rangers lasted 2 ties and he never scored a goal. And there were several seasons like that. Whereas Rangers were almost guaranteed, given the fact that they were playing Sunday League teams and Church League teams and all the rest of it, from various islands and points in Europe that nobody actually knew existed unless a plane crashed there. That he was, suddenly he's being voiced as this fantastic striker. No, he was playing tappy in against teams he should have been scoring against. When push came to shove, he was found to be badly lacking. But they could have made a tidy profit on it. Kent, 7 million quid was a lot of money for Rangers, a lot of money for Scottish football as well, if you take it over the piece. But that would only buy you a championship player in England. So maybe Rangers did buy a championship player and somebody who was no better than that. And if they did take him on board, they were hoping that he would get better. There was a time where I think people looked at him and thought, yeah, this guy could do something. But that didn't last very long. I would say at maximum that maybe lasted a window of about a year over a couple of seasons. But since the turn of the year, and certainly since Van Bronckhorst sort of last week of his tenure, Kent just hasn't been the same player and hasn't looked interested.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I fully agree with you. I agree with you strongly on the Morelos point as well. He's doing it at a level you want him to do it. And I appreciate there's maybe some outliers, do you know what I mean? The matches against Porto and Feyenoord, which incidentally feel like ages ago now when you're getting peak Alfredo Morelos. We've not seen that Alfredo Morelos for a long time. Brian, back to the game today. I want to speak to one of the things that I think everyone is really, really frustrated about today, and indeed Eck refers to it in his post-match pod, is 8 minutes of really good watching and listening. I'd recommend you jump on and have a look. It refers to just the basic errors that led to their goal. Sort of Raskin, Barisic, and I think it was Kent or Lundstrom, I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically staring at the ball, waiting for it to move towards them, as opposed to either not waiting for the whistle and going and retrieving the ball. That was really frustrating, and I think for professionals, you think, we say this as professional podcasters, of course, but you think it is that's a basic that they should just have a grasp of. They should go to the ball, they should not wait in the whistle.
Yeah, it's something you're taught, when you're breaking through. It's not something you expect at senior level in a Scottish Cup semi-final. And what was our kind of biggest game left of the season? It was our only hope at silverware, and you've got 2 senior pros just standing looking at the ball, waiting on a whistle that's never coming. I couldn't believe that was happening. Even watching the replays, you couldn't believe that professional footballers just stand there and watch a ball and wait for a whistle that's never coming. You don't see that when in a Sunday league team. You wouldn't get away with that. I don't understand how that's in any way happens in a Scottish Cup semi-final. It just to me, it just doesn't make sense. But it's not the first kind of mistake we've seen this season. That's been happening all too often. The last few weeks, we've seen it at Aberdeen. Last weekend, we've seen it against St Mirren. We very rarely concede goals where you say that was an excellent piece of play by the opposition. Most of the goals we concede, you can clearly identify where we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot. These last few weeks, these goals we've been conceding, we very rarely get cut open by opposition. Celtic, even today, for all these, great attacking players they've got, and they're supposed to be this swashbuckling team, they never cut us open. And really, any occasion, it was all our own doing, and that's been the case too often these last few weeks. And for me, it's another area of the team that needs badly addressing, is how we defend when we don't have the ball, and how we press, and how we just switch off at times. We see it when the opposition have got a free kick in our half. The number of times our players just turn their back on it and walk away, or when they've got a throw in our half, the number of times our players just turn their back on it. We're not alive to the play. We're not quick enough. We're not sharp enough. In these moments, and today it's cost us massively.
I think the phrase that Brian used there, Celtic didn't have to be swashbuckling. They you think of swashbuckling and Errol Flynn, flying round pirate ships with his cutlass in his hand, fighting his way through to win the treasure or the hand of the lady or something like that. Celtic were more akin to the Slag Brothers out of the Wacky Racers with a big club, because they knew all they had to do was stay in the game, and Rangers would make a mistake. Rangers would make an error. And when that happened, wham, it's over and done with. And that was all they had to do. They could stick in the game. Rangers were never going to, you had the possession stats and all the rest of it. I read one or two people saying, Rangers did quite well. Well, listen, until such times as artistic impression comes into football and you give a mark for that, it's down to goals, and Rangers never really looked like scoring many goals today. But Celtic only had to wait on these mistakes. And as Brian rightly says, I mean, I was going to say Sunday League stuff. It was pub league when everybody turns up with a hangover, and just, first of all, Rangers completely switched off when the free kick was taken.
Yeah.
And then waited on something like Newton's fourth law of gravity or something like that and taking effect. And a ball which was stationary rolling towards them as if it's some magnetic force field that was actually going to attract it to them. Yeah. And Celtic, on both occasions, responded and reacted quicker. And that's all you're looking for your team in those moments. And lo and behold, another blunder, and Rangers are a goal behind, chasing the game. And you know that when Rangers have gone a goal behind for a long period of time, if they struggle to score a goal to break the deadlock, they struggle even more to get back into the game once they've lost one, especially against a team as resolute and as well organised as Celtic. This is not a great Celtic side. It's just that they do the simple things far better than anybody else in that league.
Yeah. Stuart, one of the things that frustrated me about the goal, other than the basic error on the lead up to the goal, and it's frustrated me for a wee while now, is the amount of goals we lose where a cross comes in either from the right-hand side straight to the rear post or vice versa. I think we've seen it way too often. Probably predominantly we've seen it in Europe. In Gerrard's tenure, we've seen it quite a lot. It's really frustrating when you see a ball come across to the left back position, and we know that they've all fannied about in that corner and done nothing with it. But Tav gets caught out at the back post again, and it just looks like a comedy of errors for them to take the lead today.
Because of the system that teams play, I'm not going into some sort of tactical thing, but the way that teams play, if you play four at the back, historically teams played with four midfielders, and you can mix them up but the guy who was a wide guy was always a guy who tracked back with a runner who was going wide, which allowed your right back or your left back, if they did drift into the middle, at least he knew he had some level of cover behind him by somebody filling that void that he was going to leave. Just doesn't happen now, because you play with two holding midfielders who seldom leave that middle channel, and another three guys who are the attacking midfielders who basically go, is it my job to track back? Don't think so. You look at the really effective teams around, and the guys who play right attacking midfield or left attacking midfield or whatever it is, they will track back. And if they don't, teams are getting found out. You look at what's happened to Liverpool, because teams have worked out that their full-backs press on, so you go in behind them. You look at Arsenal the other night against Manchester City, press. Man City, bang, over the top, and we've got guys like Haaland and De Bruyne in the midfield and one or two others. You'll score goals when that happens.
Yeah.
Scottish football's not at that level. So the most basic things will see you through. And I'm reminded last week, Ali McCoist was on Breakfast on Talk Sport, and he was speaking to Laura Woods, and she had a bit of a giggle that Ali had captained Rangers once or twice, and he said once or twice, and she said only once or twice. He went, well, there were other guys that would captain the team before me, and you went into that team, and if it wasn't Gough who was captain the Rangers, you had people like John Brown, you had people like Ian Ferguson, you had other people in that team who were stepping up and wearing the captain's armband. That current Rangers team, there are no captains. Tavernier is captain for me in name only, because he scores some remarkable goals, some remarkable free kicks. He contributes as an attacking option. But when push comes to shove, I don't think I've ever seen him grab hold of people and give them a telling off on the pitch for not doing the job they're supposed to be doing. Why? Yeah. Because there are times where he doesn't do it himself. And I do think there is a real lack of leadership in that Rangers team, and I've thought it for a considerable while. And people will say, well, Goldson did okay. Yeah, they do okay. Lundstrom might have done okay. Doing okay isn't enough if you're going to win things, and certainly not enough given the history that Rangers have.
So, now I don't want to get too far ahead of where I am here, but Stuart, you brought up an interesting point there on Tavernier.
They're all interesting. That's why you get paid the big money.
That's true. That's why you get more than us. One thing that I think is really interesting, the summer, Beale's obviously going to have to make big decisions. And I do think, and people won't like us saying it, I get that, I understand that, because he scored 100 goals, but I think the position of James Tavernier is a big discussion point, whether he remains captain or whether, I don't think there's a particular appetite for him to leave the club, Stuart, but do you think, I don't want to say take the captaincy off him, but you have to wonder what he's bringing when he is captain. As you rightly say, I grew up watching Gough and more recently Barry Ferguson, who was a successful captain, Butcher as well. A few times he captained, and he was surrounded by guys who were of a similar, not roaring ilk, but they had that ability to drag them through games. I think Tavernier's missing that beside him just now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, the captaincy, people go into the captaincy of a football team, it's different from the captaincy in cricket or even the captaincy in rugby and what you do. But if you're the captain on the pitch, there should be at least another two guys or three guys in that team who would tell you what to do. I mean, I was thinking about different things and different examples of this with Rangers. Remember the 2-2 game against Marseille came back 30 years ago?
Yeah.
And Stephen Presley, I think, scored an own goal, right?
Yeah.
And Gorham, Andy tried to blame Presley for the own goal. Well, it was his own goal. But Presley basically pointed the finger at Gorham and told the goalie, you should have been coming for that. That's your fault. I'm playing the ball because you didn't come for it. Now, that was a young guy who was still in his teens, but had the wherewithal to actually say, no, you made the mistake. And I'm not saying you can go from 1 to 11 or whatever your squad numbers are and think that everybody's got to be a captain. But, all through all through my time of having anything to do with Rangers or watching Rangers or whatever, I can always think that there were 2 or 3 or 4 people in that team who were, if you like, vice captains, and who would give other people a rollicking for not doing their job. When that goal was scored today, what did you actually see? If you actually watch it, there were people throwing their hands up, almost like, oh, not again. How did that happen? You know, it was like, rather than people doing a bit of finger point and saying, that was your job, switch on. No, switch on up there as well. Do your job. Where were you? It was such an easy goal. And as I said earlier there, Celtic hardly had to break sweat to beat Rangers because they knew the mistake was coming. And if you are playing against opposition who are reading the game like that and reading how 90 minutes will go, just bide your time. Just keep it as a blank. Don't lose any goals. Don't panic. We'll get a chance when it comes. Just take it. You're almost losing the game before you start, because unless you can iron out these mistakes, the most basic and fundamental mistakes of 1, doing your job, and 2, doing the marking and covering that you should be doing, then you're on to hiding to nothing.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you, and I do think the captaincy role and any vice captain role in the summer is something that Michael Beale will have to consider amongst many, many other things. Don't forget, this is Gersnet, it's the Old Firm Review podcast on your Sunday night. My name's Scott Patterson. If you're joining us, as always, you're very welcome. Big thanks to our partners for the season, Forest Precision Engineering. They, of course, have their own hospitality box in the main stand at Ibrox. If you want to have a wee checkout of that, I recommend you do. Give them a wee email, hospitality@rangers.co.uk. We're very grateful for their support this year. Brian, how does Fashion Sakala not score?
I have no idea, but it's not the first time I've said that in the last 7 days, to be honest, does it really? And that's becoming the problem with Fashion Sakala. You know, people say, oh, he's a menace, he's unpredictable, but his finishing is just so woeful that you just wouldn't trust him to play up front, to be honest. It's a real problem, just the front 3 in general. I wouldn't necessarily back any of them to score when they're one-on-one with a goalkeeper. Now, Sakala's one today for me was worse because it was virtually an open goal. The goalkeeper wasn't even in the equation. He had the whole goal essentially to aim at, and he still manages to put it wide. Probably if there was one of the forwards you didn't want that one to land to, it would have been Sakala. But yeah, I don't know how he misses it, but for me it's now becoming a question whether if we can get any sort of fee for Sakala in the summer, I think we should potentially look at it. I was all for keeping him as a squad player. I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, I wouldn't mind keeping him as a squad player. But for me, if there's any clubs that would give us a fee for him, I would be seriously considering it, because I think for this rebuild in the summer we need to try and generate some income, and he might be a player that we could do that with. But yeah, it was a shocking miss. I still can't quite believe it.
Stuart, Fashion had one of these days where everything he touched, the open goal, and then he had the cross, and then he had another shot that literally went out for a throw-in. And the fact he just had one of those afternoon, and let's be honest, if there's ever a game that you don't want to have an afternoon, it's against Celtic. But when it's a Scottish Cup semi-final rather than you're chasing the game, you just need to be on it. And I do wonder if he scores that chance, because it's nearing the end of the game, it puts an entirely different sort of bubble around the final sort of 10 minutes. But I've watched a couple. I've seen a still of it, and we need better quality than that. But it's so, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy for us to score. I find it hard to understand how he's missed.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the last, I'd say probably in the last, well, certainly 15 years, you have to take everything with a prerequisite or the precondition that if there are people playing for Rangers just now, it's because they're probably not good enough to be playing elsewhere. And, you know, Sakala is not a goal scorer, and I've seen some of the best not just at Rangers, but across the world, not scoring goals they should have scored.
Yeah.
But that was one that I'm sure he will wake up, about 1:30 this morning, suddenly and think, I've scored. Oh no, I never scored, did I? I better go back to sleep again. And if he goes back to sleep, he shouldn't be at Ibrox, and that should be haunting him for a while. It just wasn't a great day for him. The other thing I would say, and a bit in his defence, he's put on a half time to salvage the situation because Kent wasn't up to it.
Correct, absolutely.
And you can be critical of Sakala, but always remember the guy that you turned up to see and turned up and hope that you would actually get a game out of him, namely Kent, just didn't do it, didn't cut it, didn't produce. So, yeah, you can be critical of Sakala, but even after 45 minutes, he shouldn't have been on the pitch. So I'd always, put that kind of precursor in there that maybe, wrong place, wrong time, definitely, but it was a place he shouldn't have actually been in.
Stuart, do you think, and I'll stick with you on this one because it'll take us quite nicely into the chat that takes us up to what happens in the summer. Probably a bit concerning that we go into a semi-final against Celtic and the front three, or however we're playing it, whether we're playing with two wingers and a 10 or a number 9, it was just so fruitless for them. And I don't think I buy into the theory it's because Celtic were so good defensively. I think it was just we were so poor in that sort of offensive manner that you really need to be on your game at in these occasions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the managers get this certain formations in their heads, and it's how they're going to play. And this, 4-2-3-1 is the formation that Rangers play in. In some respects, that's a formation that other people use, but I've never thought that Rangers had the personnel to play that particular formation. If Rangers came out and played 4-5-1, I would see it more of it might be slightly more pragmatic, but you at least should be identifying the fact that we're going to play in a particular way and not put the onus on the guys to say, well, we think you and you should all be amongst our goal scorers. Yeah. I mean, in the past 30 odd years, probably even approaching 40 years, you can count on one hand. In fact, you might be able to count probably on a couple of fingers how many players Rangers have had at their disposal who genuinely were box-to-box attack-minded midfielders who would produce a finish.
Yeah.
The two that spring to mind for me would be Gersnet and Barry Ferguson.
Yeah, agreed.
George Albert's had a time when he might do it. Van Bronckhorst had a time when he could probably do it. But these guys are as rare as, I was going to say hen's teeth, but actually they're as rare as trophies at Ibrox in the past, couple of seasons. So to find somebody like that, you are really you're going to toil. The thing is, Rangers found both of those guys as kids and came through the ranks at Ibrox rather than going out and trying to buy somebody. So maybe they should look closer to home. But you look at those guys, and some of them can't decide whether they are wide players who should be attacking, wide players who should be supporting, central midfielders who should be defending first and then attacking, or where the hell they are. Yeah. And I think, you go back through several teams. I mean, Walter Smith wasn't averse to turning up and playing big games with 4 centre-backs in his team. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. And because needs must, and that's the way, the pragmatic approach would be, if we don't let them score, we've got half a chance of winning in the game on the break. I think that sometimes Rangers are sending teams out that on paper, yeah, this is what they're capable of, But the difference is that's you playing the game out in your head or playing it on paper. The practicalities are that teams will line up a certain way to stop or negate these players. And I don't think Rangers have got enough guile or gumption to counteract that.
Brian, one of the I don't want to say it wasn't a shining light at all, but if we were to take a positivity element from it today, I felt that Cantwell and Raskin actually both played all right. I thought Cantwell probably had his best Old Firm game thus far. I didn't think he had a great time at Celtic Park. I thought he was okay today. There was obviously rumours that were sort of flying about yesterday in social media that Raskin was out for the game. I felt as the game went on, he continued to look like he was tiring a little bit, which perhaps buys into the theory that he may not have been 100% fully fit. Those two played okay. And I think if Beale is given the support financially in the summer to bring in guys of a similar ilk, he should be okay if we're bringing in guys that are like these two.
Yeah, I definitely trust Beale in terms of he's having more of a say in the transfers. I'm pretty comfortable with that. I think he knows how to identify a player. He seems to know what he wants in a player. He's been in Scottish football long enough now to know what it takes to win Scottish football, so hopefully that helps him in terms of identifying players and the kind of attributes that they need that maybe we don't see. So I'm pretty confident in that. I thought Cantwell did reasonably well today. I thought he, created some good stuff. He had some good touches. I thought he tried to link the play. I don't think he's helped with Morelos being pretty immobile just now up front. I think that really hampers our attacking play with how just immobile he is just now.
Yeah.
So hopefully once we get a more mobile striker in there, Bill's talked about needing a new number 9. So hopefully once that arrives in the summer, that kind of helps guys like Cantwell in terms of playing those balls through. Raskin, I thought he did okay, although he was on the scene of the crime for their goal. So I would slightly take marks off him for that. He does seem to tire in games. We've kind of noticed that a few times. He's always the kind of first one to go off. There's always rumours about him being injured for games. So when I heard that rumour last night, I was starting to get a bit worried about just his general fitness. He's missed a few games, and if there's ever a pre-game rumour about an injury, it's usually Raskin at the minute. I'm hoping that he's just a player that needs a pre-season. I know that before he came to us, he hadn't played an awful lot. He was out in the cold in Belgium, so hopefully once he gets a pre-season under his belt, he'll be flying next season in terms of fitness and form. And yeah, I'm pretty confident that Beale's seems to have all his ducks in a row in terms of he knows who he wants to bring in. He's been saying for weeks now that all the work in terms of the incoming's done. He's identified the players. It's now just a case of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Hopefully we'll start to see some results of that soon. And I guess they'll then be judged on what they do next season. But at the moment, in terms of, Cantwell and Raskin, that's the two kind of positives, if you want to call that, to come out of the kind of back half of this season. And if we can find more players of that quality, then hopefully we should be in a much better position next season.
But I mean, Morelos took. I mean, he's the starting striker, starting number 9. I mean, but honestly, he carved a new niche when it comes to a false number 9, because he, I mean, I've seen corner flags that are more threatening than anything that he has done in this particular game. The other thing is worrying is that you've got Scott Arfield coming off the bench and playing his part. Okay, 100% trier, 100% a Rangers guy. But remember, it wasn't that long ago since we were hearing about the quality that Rangers had in this squad. Yeah. And you're still pulling somebody aged, pensionable age in football terms, off the bench to salvage your season. Yeah. Hadji, he comes off the bench a matter of minutes to go. Rangers fans are hoping, it's Hadji. Let's hope we get something from him. But even with him, you're hoping about the Hadji that was playing 18 months ago, not the guy who's given anything. And I think there are too many people hoping that Rangers players who did the job for them in the past can do something again, when the actual reality is they've not done enough recently to actually justify being there.
I think that's a problem overall at Rangers at times, as we hold on to players too long and we romanticise what they've done for us in the past. Yeah. I think there comes a time when we need to say, right, he's been great for us, but now's the right time to cash in. And for me, we haven't done that enough. It's something that we kind of badly need to look at in terms of this player trading model that we keep talking about. Is the right time to cash in on players and get the maximum value.
History lesson number 1. Exhibit A, John Gregg.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
You only need to look back at the team and the players that he had at his disposal and how he hung on to them and clung on to them because of what they'd done in the past, rather than giving a whole bunch of other guys a chance, and they just drifted away.
Yeah, Stuart, Michael Beale said post-match that the summer, he basically alluded to the summer being a huge rebuild. I've said a couple of times previously that I reckon this summer could be almost Advocat-esque in the amount of bodies coming in and the bodies going out. I think it has to be now. I mean, we're slowly but surely seeing players almost develop a skin that isn't a Rangers skin now. I think you're seeing guys that are almost not desperate to get out. I don't mean it like that, but you're certainly seeing guys that seem keen to progress their career elsewhere now, aren't you?
Yeah, because I think, and I think it's very simple in Scottish football. I think I've spoken to enough players from both halves of Glasgow over the years, and that mindset comes when you're not getting the better of your biggest rivals.
Yeah,
it's happening to Rangers just now. It happened to Celtic during the 90s when Rangers were on, the 9 in a row run. It happened even, during the last years of Walter Smith's tenure when Rangers were all sort of dominant then, and some of the players that decided this isn't doing, coming second isn't doing me any favours here. And I think there's one or two who have got that mindset. I think to themselves, anybody talks about Scottish football, they're talking about Celtic. I play for Rangers. Do I really need to be here, or do I really want to be here? And that doesn't really engender great positivity amongst the rest of the squad when you've got this sort of man, mind thyself attitude about it. But I can see why it creeps in. It's human nature. You could be the best and most decorated coach in football, but again, when that seed of doubt is planted, or that doubt sort of comes over you like a cloud, it's very difficult to get rid of it. And I think some players, it's easier to get rid of them than it is to cast away that doubt that they've got in their heads.
Stuart, but obviously the club are going through a bit of I don't want to say a restructure, but there's definitely bodies that are moving around in the old chessboard. We know that John Bennett's came in as the new chairman, and we know that Stuart Robertson disappears at the end of the season and James Bisgrove moves into this new role. No one has mentioned who is coming in to do the Ross Wilson role as we move into quite literally the dying embers of the season now. The sort of tickly bit, if you like, where we have to be getting guys in Bosmans and we have to be lining new signings up. Should we be concerned as a support that Beale doesn't have that middleman, if you like, between the board and himself to look after maybe the football transfers, if you like?
I have wondered. I mean, if you look at the success rate that Ross Wilson had, yeah, he managed to unearth some diamonds, but there was a hell of a lot of coleslaw in amongst that as well, wasn't there? I mean, it wasn't all contenders for the Ballon d'Or. I mean, some should have been shown the door after a matter of weeks. I think whoever comes in there, they've got to be able to do two things. One, come up with the players ultimately that suit the manager and whatever he might want to try and achieve, or whatever style he wants to progress.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, whoever comes into that role has to be convincing enough to manage to get extricate money out of the coffers to fund the operation.
Yeah.
I think I think you're absolutely spot on with what you said there, Scott. There's a number of pieces on the chessboard just now that are getting moved around, and you're actually looking at some and think to yourself, can you actually make that move? Are you allowed to do that? I thought it was only the knight that was able to do that. You seem to be. I've lost track of where you're supposed to be going here, but I think you get my gist here. I think whoever comes in, they'll need to be a really good negotiator and want to get players to come to Ibrox. But secondly, they'll need to be a really good negotiator as well to get the purse strings sort of slightly loosened to bring in players. And it's going to be interesting again, Scott, Brian, is to see the markets that Rangers actually go down. Just now, Celtic have won a watch in terms of Ange Postecoglou's knowledge of Japanese football, because he's brought these guys in from Japan who have proven to be winners because he has cornered that market. If you remember, and you go back, to the likes of Advocat brought a whole load of Dutchmen in that nobody really heard of, and for the most part, some of these guys were sensational. I think that Rangers are looking for somebody who has a good understanding of a great many markets, but has real knowledge in certain places. I don't think we saw that. One thing that greatly let me down was in terms of Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's tenure was, he must have known the players that were floating around in Eredivisie and the Dutch players that were here, there and everywhere, and nobody came in. He's the only Dutchman or the only person from another country not to sign his own countrymen. I mean, it was quite incredible. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who Rangers can bring in on the cheap, i.e. on Bosmans or in loan deals, and who they're going to spend the money on. I don't think there's loads of money there, hence the reason why anybody that's getting shipped out will have to go for decent money, and there'll have to be a saving in one or two of the wages as well. When you hear what certain Rangers players are on just now for what they've done, I don't think they're getting value for money. Far from it.
Absolutely. Brian, one of the things I seen last week, Chris Jack said, I think it was on the Rangers Review actually, said it was around about the time we were linked with Kieran Dowell. His name came into the equation, and the suggestion that Jack Butland as well is those two guys. And do you know what I mean? The indication was that if we're looking to build a team that's going to be Champions League worthy, Championship winning worthy, we should probably be looking a bit further afield than the Championship down south. Where you placed on that?
I would hope we would. I think in this occasion, this is possibly just Michael Beale going back to the market that he knows in terms of that English Championship. He obviously knows that league well. He knows the teams in it. He knows the players in it. He does seem to like to go back for players that he's had previous relationships with. So I would expect one or two of them to come in over the summer, but I would like to think that we'd cast our net a bit wider in terms of abroad. He brought Raskin in from Belgium, so he's obviously got, contacts abroad, and he's aware of players out with England, so I would like to think that they'd be casting their net as far and wide as they can. Celtic have proven that the Asian market's possibly an untapped market. Maybe, we should be looking at other untapped markets as well that, we don't often see players from Scotland arrive from. So yeah, there's definitely scope to go further afield than just the Championship. But it doesn't surprise me that that's where the bulk of our kind of links are coming from just now, in terms of we know that Michael Beale's got kind of more control over the transfers in this window. So it's no surprise he's going back to the market he's familiar with. Just to go back to a point that Stuart made about the potential new director of football, he'll also need to be a good negotiator in terms of offloading players. Like Stuart said, I don't think there's going to be masses of money floating around to go and buy a striker for X number of millions. So we need to try and get some value out of these players that we potentially want to offload. And I think it's difficult to get top value for players that other clubs know that you want to sell. They're not going to pay top value if they know that you actively want to sell X player. Yeah. So I think that's another thing we need to look at in terms of getting a director of football in. The one thing I'll say about Ross Wilson is I believe he did manage to get money for Eros Grezda, so maybe we should have held on to him until the summer business was done, just so he could look after the outgoings. Because I think that was a trick that not many could have pulled off.
I think it's a pity currently that human organ trafficking is no longer allowed. Otherwise, I think that'd would bring us in, a right few quid. But I mean, ultimately, and again, Brian's point is totally justified. I think the fact that word has got out, and it got out really early on in the season, that there were certain players whose future at Ibrox was in doubt a while ago, long before this semi-final came around.
Yeah.
Even when Beale was in the middle of his honeymoon period and winning games that ultimately Rangers looked as if they were actually going to lose, I think even then that there was word coming out that Rangers were going to get rid of X, Y, and Z in the lead up to, or at least during the summer. That might have unsettled one or two players, but it also meant that the market knew that Rangers were going to have a bargain basement clear out, and that there'd be players to be had, on the cheap. I do think there's, I don't worry about the future of certain players if they leave Ibrox. I think they'll be, they'll be fine elsewhere. And like say Barisic, if he left, I think there's more than one club would be happy to take him back in Croatia, or various others might disappear back to Europe. But I do think it's going to be it might be the biggest, if you like, the biggest signing that Rangers actually do make is whoever fills that director of football role.
Stuart, I want to stick with you because obviously when Michael Beale came up, you would imagine that part of his remit, and I'm assuming managers are set remits the minute they change job. You would imagine that one of the suggestions was that you retain this trophy this season. Mm-hmm. If you don't, there's a huge amount of pressure that's instantly piled on yourself, regardless of what you do in the summer, because you start the new season trophyless, regardless if you've got a new 1-11 or not. The pressure that I think now falls on Michael Beale to have a really clever summer with buying and selling and that whole trading model is hugely emphasised on the back of no trophies this season.
Yeah. I wondered where the bar was set, like yourself, Scott. Where is the bar? Where has the Rangers board set the bar for Michael Beale this season? Currently, he has had 2 fails at a very jumpable height, to my mind. I think they're going to hoist the bar up a bit higher for him now and say, well, you failed at those 2 heights. You've got one more jump left in this competition. You either do it or there's the door. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Regardless of what was going on and what was being said and the relationships at various levels, it makes no sense at all for you to jettison a guy who got you to a European final and won you the Scottish Cup after a matter of months into the next season, when the guy who's replaced him has done absolutely nothing, especially in the defence of the one trophy you did win. It was. I think that fact that Rangers are going to end this season trophyless, and the disappointment of it virtually ending, in the end of season dances later on, and the 3 of us are going to get our bow ties on him because we're a bit late just now. But season's over regardless of how you tart it up. I do wonder how much time Beale will have to, first of all, get the team that he wants gelled together on the pitch and produce results. Yeah. And if that doesn't happen, how long he'll have to put it right? I don't think he'll have very long.
No, and I have to say, when he came up, I was really quite happy with the appointment. But I think you're right. There's been an element of stumbling recently. And then, listen, I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't have happened under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. I'm not entirely sure that they would have had the same results under Van Bronckhorst that Beale had initially. But the last few weeks have been a bit disappointing. The trip to Celtic Park, the trip to Tawdry today. Brian, we now run into the last 5 games of the season, 5 absolute dead rubbers, for want of a better term or expression, not to mention another Old Firm game, which comes, of course, I think it's a fortnight today. No Celtic supporters at Ibrox, of course. That'll be an interesting game, and certainly one that surely we will look to get one over on them.
You would like to think so, but I just worry where this team's belief is in terms of playing Celtic again so quickly. They must feel how Celtic felt during our 55 season, where we knew before we played them that we had them beat before going to the pitch.
Yeah.
And in those games, I remember the game where I think there was 1-0 game at Parkhead where Callum McGregor scores the own goal. We didn't even have a shot on target, but we still knew we were going to beat them. I had absolutely no doubt in that day that we were going to beat them. And to be honest, that must be how they feel. And I think there's an element of our players feeling like they're beat before they go into the pitch now against Celtic because they've got that scar tissue. So I do worry about this game because they'll be looking to make another statement just to kind of, I guess, rub salt into the wounds. Our players know that it's a dead rubber. They know that for a lot of them it's, their last Old Firm game, and they're fast running out of games in a Rangers shirt. So I guess this all comes down to professional pride and how much they want to just kind of have one last go at trying to put a performance in against them and give the fans something before they sign off. Because that's really all it is. They've blown the last chance at silverware. So it now just becomes about professional pride and really just trying to give the fans something before they sign off.
Yeah, listen, Stuart, as a supporter, I think you always like to give your players the benefit of the doubt, but there's no doubt that tonight, and I'm sure a lot of the Rangers supporters up and down the country and all around the world indeed are thinking the same. I think everyone's kind of scunnered with this squad of players just now. And as I say, I don't want to accuse people of downing tools or lacking effort. But there's definitely a feeling of just being entirely fed up with the same players falling at the same hurdles and the same big games, just almost not turning up. And it does mean big decisions have to be made in these guys, and things do need to change moving into a new season.
Yeah, I wonder how many, and it's not that many, but how many of those Rangers players today are going home and getting absolute dog's abuse from their families at losing yet another game to Celtic. I mean, I think I saw some kind of stat that was 7 successive Old Firm games that Rangers had gone a goal behind in.
Terrible stat.
I mean, that should not be, I think even Rangers fans would take scoring a goal in the first minute and hanging on to get a draw rather than losing the first goal and then losing the game. So I do wonder how much, for want of a better description, how much hurt and pain there is at losing another game to Celtic, or whether it's almost like that just becomes the norm. If you look at it, there's all these different stats flying around and various graphs and all the rest of it about Scottish football, and you get Celtic up there, then Rangers there, then a bunch of teams there, and then a bunch of teams there. That's Scottish football. Rangers are above the rest, but there's a gap between them and Celtic, and a huge gap between Celtic and that kind of bunch.
Yeah.
And I'll say it again, and I remember several years ago being on various hate lists among Celtic fans because I said that the team that Brendan Rodgers had that had gone unbeaten was probably only about the 7th best Celtic team that I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
But then again, there was a whole bunch of all the kids that grew up with PlayStations and all the rest. So they told me differently. But I do wonder if these kind of defeats actually hurt enough of these guys to the core to understand that this whole garbage that's come out from Rangers players. Oh, we've progressed. No, you haven't. You're going back the way. performance-wise, you're getting back away. Mentality-wise, you're disappearing out the sort of rear view mirror. You just don't have the mentality to win some of these games. And we know how the fans hurt. No, you don't. You really don't know how the fans hurt. This is getting back to the John Gregg days of 1983 and the likes, when then it wasn't only just Celtic, it was Dundee United and Aberdeen were doing much, much better than Rangers. But this is kind of unacceptable, given the fact where Rangers have come from, and I mean winning a title a couple of years back and reaching a European final. All within living memory. Even if you were drunk all the way through it, you would still remember where Rangers had been to where they're at now, and that means that they turn up for Old Firm games and they do not look capable of getting a result against a decent Celtic side, let alone an outstanding one.
Yeah, no, listen, you're absolutely right. Stuart, it's good to have you on. I appreciate you coming on. It's hard to go on and do these pods after your team get pumped. And
I'm good at postmortems, and my eulogies at funerals are legendary. And I've just tweeted this evening as much the same.
Thanks for coming on. It's always good to see you. Brian, good to have you on as well, buddy. I'm glad you could make it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Just wish it was under better circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. So don't forget, Gersnet will be back on Friday night, where we preview the first of the final games of the split. Aberdeen come to town next weekend, which should be an absolute delight. So we look forward to that. I'm not entirely sure who's looking after. Are you looking after things on Friday, Brian?
I don't think it's me.
So it must be Colin, or it might be Craig Ray, actually.
Let's have a game at spin the bottle. Oh, it's pointing at you.
Goodness me. So listen, as I say, we're back on Friday night. If you can check out the guys, then I recommend you do. For now, don't forget to check us out across on our website, allwsgersnet.co.uk. Lots and lots of good stuff in there, including the forum, and lots of historical stuff as well. If you can check it out, I recommend you do. Have a good week. I am back probably at some point in May, I think, for your time tonight. Good night.